Hi, Doug at Connected Mobile Life. In this video, I'm going to cover some of the updates I've had done to the van to improve charging on the road. I'm also going to cover some of the tweaks I've made to my battery installation to improve it. And I'll also kind of cover kind of a 1 month review. Now that I've had the battery system in, the new charging system has actually been in for about a month. I'll give you an idea of what my usage has been and how well it's working for me. I guess first the big update upgrade that I've had done is I've installed a second alternator into the van. So I knew I wanted a Nations Alternator 280 amp lithium charging system installed. I looked at a bunch of videos. Electrically, I can handle it. The mechanics, I really wanted to leave to a professional. So I went looking around. I couldn't find anybody local that I felt could actually do it. So I ended up calling Nations and getting a recommendation from them. And they referred me to a company called Just Roaming Design. They're just located outside of Vancouver, Washington. So a bit of a drive, but I was willing to travel much further if I could find someone capable of installing this. And it turns out Just Roaming Designs has very strong relationships with Nations Alternator, Lithionics, and also Victron. If you're looking for a company that can do custom upgrades to your van in from any of those companies, I highly recommend Just Roaming Design. They did a fantastic job for me. I pointed them to my videos and talked with them while I was there. And if anybody's interested in the battery system that I've installed in my Ascent, they'd be willing to do the entire upgrade for you. So I'd recommend giving them a call if that's of interest to you. If you don't want to take it on yourself, I mean, it is a lot of work, and I think it could be done much faster than I did it. Now that I've kind of mapped out how things have to work, I spent a lot of time figuring things out as I went. So anyway. So Just Roaming Designs installed the Nations Alternator for me. So I now have a 280 amp charger that's in the system. I'll take you back in a minute and I'll show you the system and how they installed it. So I won't go into the alternator. It's buried in the engine, but I'll show you where the regulator is. In terms of the regulator, when you buy an alternator from Nations Alternator, the default regulator you get is Belmar, which it's a good regulator, but I found that there's a better one available that you can buy as an option through Nations. It's a Wakespeed 500, and the key differentiation that the Wakespeed gives you, or the benefit over something like the Belmar, is that the Wakespeed will connect directly to the Lithionics over a network cable. So each of the Lithionics batteries you have talk directly to the Wakespeed alternator. The Wakespeed alternator gets data from the battery management system that's built into the Lithionics batteries. So it's the only regulator that will take into account the voltage, the current that's being put into it, the state of charge, and the temperature of the battery. The temperature was one of the things that I was really concerned about. So I'm pushing a lot of current into those batteries to charge them. You're getting 280 amps being pushed into these, and I have two batteries currently, and each battery has a maximum of 150 amps that it can take in, a recommended maximum. So that's close to the maximum level of input current that I'm pushing into the batteries. So I wanted to make sure that the regulator was sufficiently matched to those batteries to protect the battery, so I'm not overcharging them in any condition, whether it's below freezing or if it's up over 110, 120 degrees, which it did get to this summer here in Oregon. And we had a very hot couple of weeks here in Oregon, and I noticed the batteries were getting up high enough so that I actually stopped charging when I was manually watching the temperature of the batteries, and they were up over 110 degrees sitting in the back of the van in my carport, and I was pushing 150 amps at the time from my inverter charger that I've installed. So I basically unplugged it, waited to the evening when the batteries cooled down, and then I plugged it in again. So, I mean, the Lithionics will protect from the voltage, from the temperature. It'll look at, I think it cuts off around 120 degrees. But I prefer to manage the temperature below that if at all possible. And the Wakespeed does that. So what it'll do is if it senses the temperature going up in the battery, it'll back off on the current that it goes through. So the alternator will put out up to 280 amps, but the regulator basically talks to the alternator to regulate, tell it, just how many amps it should actually be pushing to the battery. So it can lower the current effectively coming from the alternator to the battery to adjust it based on the temperature of the battery, as well as the which cycle point in the charge cycle it's operating at. So I obviously I recommend the Wakespeed if you're going to do this upgrade. I just think you're spending this much for the battery, spend a little bit more and get a good regulator that matches to it. That was my philosophy anyway. So another aspect, just to kind of give you an idea of how we've been using the system. So I work during the week. It's very important for me to, I work remote, a lot of times just from the van. And it's important for me to have my laptop running all the time. So when my wife is here, she does the same thing. She'll run. We both have 15-inch MacBook Pros. They run anywhere between say 40 and 80 watts of power while they're charging the battery, especially. So when we're out here during the week, we're traveling. Usually the inverter's on at least 8 to 10 hours a day, and laptops are plugged in all the time. And we cook everything from induction or the microwave. We have a compressor refrigerator. So everything is running off of the power system. So what we found is that on a peak day, when I did a lot more cooking than I would normally do. We have an electric kettle that I make coffee for, so it's a heavy coffee day. But we ended up peaking our usage at about 180 amps in a day, given all of those appliances. Also, we were running the heater as well. So heater, we have a diesel heater, does use some power, and but we run it 8 hours a day, and it uses very little fuel. And then whenever the fan's running, you get power. It uses a few amps an hour. And we also have a cellular booster that we'll run in remote areas as we're traveling. That's about 1 amp hour. So another 8 to 10 amps a day of cell boost. So all told, about 180 amps peak. So if you look at that gives us about 2.5 to 3 days of runway, assuming we have those peak days consecutively with no sun. So if we're sitting, we can sit for about 2 to 3 days with this battery system without driving and without sun. Our tanks, we can go 4 to 5 days if we're really conservative on it. So one of the things that I'm considering is that 2 batteries are really just enough. And so we're really thinking about potentially adding a 3rd battery in here, and that would give us a battery on our peak days that would match our runway with our tanks. So that's one of the things that we're considering with the battery system going forward. But it'll be, of course, a trade-off between storage and the battery capacity. So right now, with the 2 batteries in, I measured it out, and we end up with 5.6 square feet of sort of storage surface underneath that sofa, sort of between the 2 sofa legs is what I'm considering. And that's compared to the original PleasureWave battery system. When that was in with that wall that they cover the charge converter with, that's 5.5 square feet. So I consider with the 2 Lithionics batteries, I've increased my storage space over and above what the 200 amp original Pleasureway system was. So yeah, only 0.1 square feet, but I still consider it a win. But if I add the third battery now, that's going to significantly cut into that. You're talking about 6 inches by, say, 24 inches. So it's another square foot off. So we'd end up with about 4.5 square feet of storage space if we add another battery in. So still an okay amount of storage, but I think the storage space to me is probably more of a consideration than the work and putting that and the cost of that third battery. So future video, I'll let you know how that decision comes out. But for now, I'd say the 2 batteries really just it's well tuned to how we use the van, and as long as we drive a little bit in the van, that should be fine. It doesn't, with the 280 amp alternator, you're really on average getting about 200 amps because it does regulate the current up and down, depending on which point in the charge cycles it is, and also other factors with the battery, and obviously the temperature we mentioned. So I mean, if you think of that, you get, say, 200 amps an hour, and if half hour drive, you get 100 amps. So that's, if you drive an hour a day, that would probably, or even 15 minutes a day, it would be enough to probably extend us into that 4 to 5 day range with our peak usage with the 2 batteries without having to go to the third. So a lot of factors to consider. Everything is a trade-off. You got to consider everything: your usage, the amount of storage you want, and also kind of the complexity of how much you want to add to your battery system to get up to that level. Another significant point or data set on the third battery is, if you add 3 of these Lithionics batteries, it's equivalent to what the Storyteller Overland battery system is. So that would give you 12 kilowatts of power, which is probably the most commercially available right now for certainly for a manufactured van. That's the most you can get in terms of a battery system. So it's a little bit of bragging rights. If I get third battery, I can say I'm equivalent now to the Storyteller Overland battery system. So, all right, let's head back. I'll give you a look at where things are right now with the alternator install and the Lithionics. Also, a couple other minor tweaks that we've made to the power system. Okay, here we are in the back of the van again with the electrical setup. The batteries are still in the same position. I haven't built the cabinet yet. I want to put a cabinet with just a false wall to cover the wires there. I'm going to come up around to package in the batteries. This looks a little nicer, and I don't have to be overly concerned when I toss things in here for storage, but I don't want to do that until I make the decision on that third battery. So hopefully in the next few weeks I'll come up with a plan, and so either I'll have a third battery and then I'll do that, or I'll have that cabinet built. All right, so let's take a look at the alternator regulator, that the Wakespeed that was installed. So basically what I did was I removed, this is where I had the DC-DC charger. I had him remove that and had him put the Wakespeed here. So if you get the Balmar regulator, that actually installs right next to the alternator up front in the engine compartment. The Wakespeed gets installed near the batteries, primarily because of the LAN cables, the data cables that come out. So this is the main connector that there's a harness that goes and connects to the alternator. So they drilled a hole here to get underneath and then run these cables underneath the van. These actually go up underneath the driver's seat because this gets switched on and off when the key's in the ignition. So basically when the ignition is on, this will power up. So it keeps the battery drain down on the main battery. So one hole. This is the only hole they had to drill for me, and I'll go through why that is, or how they achieved that. Because obviously the 4-aught cable from the alternator had to come back here as well, but they did something pretty clever for that. So this is the cable for the power sense and ignition control here, that are just kind of running down into the to the front. And then there's also a power cable that connects to the battery sense, that basically comes and loops around, basically around here and up to the top of the battery. Also, this is where the data cables will also loop around up through here and to the batteries. So the data network cables are these right here. So there's a special cable you get from Lithionics. There's actually a cable from Lithionics and a cable from Wakespeed that you need to connect into the data circuits here. So if I add a third battery, I'll need to add another one of these cables for the third battery as well. So it's very clean install. If you look at it, these are my portable solar wires here, but so it basically fits right along, with the installation that I did, neating up the wires. One of these days I'll get busy and really kind of tighten the wire cable bundling a little bit better, but everything is secure in here as is. So I mentioned the power cables. So these two are the 4-aught cables that are coming from the alternator, going into my positive and negative bus bars here for the main power feed, and from there it goes to the batteries for charging. So one of the things that I had done, so considering that I can run my air conditioner from these batteries, all my power can be satisfied with these two batteries, and with the alternator, with a 280 amp alternator, that's an equivalent to a 3,500 on average 3,500 watt generator in effect to charge those batteries. I decided I really don't need the generator at all in the van, and actually I consider it dead weight. When I look at its usage, I've run my generator for roughly 3 or 4 hours over 4 years and 40,000 miles. So really gets no use at all, and it's 120 pounds of dead weight. So what I did was I had just Roaming Designs remove the generator. So I'm now generator free. I've got a lot more ground clearance in the back here, and it also made it easier for them to run wires up into this space for the power system. The other thing they did was there were cables that went from the generator up in underneath the ottoman on the driver's side. So when they removed the alternator, they removed those wires, and then when they ran the 4-aught cable from the alternator under the engine, or actually coming, from under the engine, they reused those holes. Just ran the 4-aught wire through the holes that the generator wires used to go to, and then came through. There's a cable chase back in here from the driver's side ottoman in. So they ran those cables. You can kind of see them back there, up through the ottoman, through here, and then they come through into my positive and negative bus bar. So really clean design. Minimal, only a single new hole had to be drilled over here, and for the last month it's been running flawlessly. It's been a really great system. Very happy with it. With the generator, there was a transfer switch that was inside this van that would switch between the shore power connection and the generator when it was on. So when the generator ran, when you had to when you wanted to charge your batteries, or run the AC outlets, generator would start up, and it would throw a transfer switch and switch the AC source to the generator to run everything. So actually, another consideration is that would mean that the generator would only charge your batteries at 45 amps, which was the what the converter in this van was rated at. And in fact, they actually put a circuit breaker on, Pleasureway put a circuit breaker on to limit the usable current to 80 amps. So another reason to get rid of that generator. It really doesn't put out a lot of current for charging this size of battery bank. So anyway, generator's gone. So I had no more use for the transfer switch. And the transfer switch was located right here on the driver's side of the van back here. I don't know if you can see it. It's kind of really get a good focus on it. But so what I did was I removed the transfer switch completely, and I put in a Progressive Industries surge and electrical protection device built into the van. So what this does is basically it senses over/under voltage, pedestal miswiring, and surge current coming from the power line, and will shut down the AC input to the van if any conditions go into a point that's dangerous for your van or your batteries. So this is something that I carry with me normally. So before I had this, I used to carry this unit. So this is same company, Progressive Industries, same level of protection. It's an EMS with surge protection. It also has a nice display on it that tells you the pedestal voltage, how much current you're drawing, and the frequency. And it also displays error codes, so you know if there's any wiring issues going on. So with this portable system, with the built-in system here, it also has a display. So from there, what I did was, I don't know if you can see it, but above the TV there's a little black box. It's a remote display for that built-in unit. So basically, while I'm plugged in, I have all the data right here in terms of what the voltage level is on the pedestal, any errors that are coming on, and what I use it for mostly is to determine how much current I'm drawing from the line and the pedestal. So number of reasons I like to do that, and I'll get into that in a bit. I'll talk through some of the other updates I've made inside here on the electrical system to give you an idea of why that's useful. But usually with the portable unit, I was always kind of walking outside to the pedestal to read the display to see how much current we're drawing, and to see what the voltage levels were in the campground. So really nice, convenient to have it inside now. So now this, I no longer have to carry this. So this thing was a massive amount of space. So just not having this in the van any longer, frees up a tremendous amount. I can carry a whole bunch of. I can carry another chair, another jack to make it easier for me to change tires. The storage is endless now without this thing. Okay, so we took out the generator, put in a built-in EMS, and put in a new alternator charge circuit. So this is something I probably should have done right up front when I first installed the 3000 watt inverter. As you recall, I've upgraded the wiring to the system to 10 gauge wire that's suitable for 30 amp circuit. So the 3000 watt inverter is really a 30 amp service
but I had left the 20 amp breakers in here for both the input to the inverter and the inverter output. So what I just did recently is I took, this used to be a double breaker, one for the input to the inverter and one for the air conditioner. But as you also may recall from my earlier videos, I moved the air conditioner over to the inverter side. See here, so it's the air conditioner is running off of this 20 amp circuit breaker right here on the output of the inverter only. So I didn't really need this any longer. So I replaced the dual breaker with a single 30 amp breaker just to run the input of the inverter. So I mentioned I'm monitoring the current. So previously, if I was charging the batteries from shore power through the inverter charger, I was measuring about 18 amps going into coming from the pedestal into the inverter charger, and this used to be a 20 amp circuit. So as you can imagine, if I did anything else, including just plugging a laptop, that would bump this up over 20 amps and the breaker would pop. So this was a critical upgrade. I had to get a 30 amp breaker in here. So now I can charge at a full 150 amps off the pedestal and make a cup of coffee, which is always important to me. The other thing I did, of course, once I did that, I figured I might as well just go ahead and upgrade the service. This was a 20 amp output of the inverter, limiting it to 20 amps. So I went to the full 30 amps that the wire can handle. Remember, you want the breakers to match the wire capacity, not necessarily what you're trying to run on it. So the wires I put in here were capable of 30 amps. They're 10 gauge wires, so safe to do. And now I can use the full capacity of that 3,000 watt inverter output so I can run the air conditioner, which actually runs less than 20 amps AC, and then I can also run I can actually run the microwave along with the air conditioner. So that was a critical tweak. Wasn't really an upgrade. It's something that I really should have done. At the time, I didn't have the breakers, and I figured everything ran on 20 amps before. There was nothing harming it from limiting it to 20 amps. Just I had to make sure that whatever I plugged in was under it, otherwise the breaker would pop. So, but now I have nothing to be concerned with. So I have a full 30 amp service now off of the batteries. With this inverter, it's whether you put a 3,000 or 2,000 watt inverter in, these Xantrex inverters, they have two what turn out to be very high velocity fans in the back, and this is what cools the inverter. So you're going to have a lot of air sucking in here, and then it comes out at the other end. And I noticed that this was running. Or the fans would run, well, it runs whenever you plug it in to charge, and then it'll cycle on and off during the day based on the load that you have as this warms up. And I have a infrared thermometer that I've been checking the temperature on. So as I hear it run, I'll just kind of pop this lid and shoot it with the infrared on the fans and see what the temperature is. I can see the temperature of the this cavity as well. And then I was also looking at the temperature of the output, and I noticed that whenever this chamber got to about 80 degrees, the fan would kick on. So obviously this is the vent that came with the Pleasure Way. This is the only vent that they had for input for the old inverter that I replaced, and then they had a vent in the back there for the exhaust. So I found essentially that this was not sufficient to pull air in through here. So what I did was I cut in 2 additional vents here. So these are 3-inch vents that I put in just to open up this space to give it plenty of of airflow. And so far, limited testing is I've only had this in for about a week. I kind of rushed these in because I got another big trip coming up. So I'll let you know at the end of the trip what I find. But my initial tests, when I plug this in, these are sucking a lot of air. I can put my hand over it, and I can feel the pull of the air coming through here. And I think the biggest difference is I noticed a bigger air velocity coming out of the exhaust. So I think that's, if you're going to do an upgrade like this, I think these are going to be a critical piece to make sure you add these vents, just to make sure you get a sufficient airflow here to keep this cool. So that's it for this video. Hope you found it useful, and thanks for watching.